The ceremonial hall glowed with silver firelight as hundreds of pack members filled the elevated balconies above. Tonight was supposed to end with celebration. Instead, silence spread across the room like something breaking. Lyra Soren stood at the center of the bond platform, dressed in ceremonial white, her wrist still connected to Alpha Kalen Vyers through the glowing bond mark between them. Future Luna. Future Alpha pair. That was what everyone came to witness. Kalen looked down at the mark once, then spoke coldly. "Break the bond." The entire hall froze. A council elder rose immediately from his seat. "Alpha Kalen, reconsider your wording carefully." Kalen didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on Lyra. "I reject the bond," he said clearly. Gasps exploded across the chamber. Lyra felt the mark burn sharply against her skin, then crack. Silver light flickered violently between them before dimming into almost nothing. A servant near the back dropped a tray in shock. "No," someone whispered. "That's impossible." "Not during ceremony," Lyra finally spoke over the noise. "Say it properly." Kalen's jaw tightened slightly. "I already did." "No," she said calmly. "You hid behind ritual words. Say what you actually mean." The entire room watched him. Kalen exhaled once. "I won't take you as my mate." The silence afterward felt heavier than the rejection itself. Lyra looked at him for one long second. No tears. No pleading. That unsettled him more than anger would have. A council elder stepped forward urgently. "This violates fated bond law. Public rejection requires unanimous council approval before—" "It's over," Kalen interrupted. Lyra lowered her gaze briefly to the fading mark on her wrist. Then she nodded once. "Understood," she said quietly. Kalen looked almost surprised by how easily she accepted it. That was his mistake. Lyra stepped backward off the ceremonial platform slowly while whispers exploded throughout the hall around her. She's just leaving. Without fighting him? What happens now? Lyra ignored every voice, ignored Kalen too, and for the first time since entering the ceremonial hall, she walked away from him completely. The whispers followed Lyra all the way down the ceremonial steps. Not quietly, never quietly. "She looks calmer than he does. Did the bond fully break? Why would an alpha reject a fated mate publicly?" Lyra kept walking. The cracked bond mark on her wrist still stung beneath her sleeve, but she didn't touch it. Behind her, the ceremony hall remained frozen in confusion, while council elders argued around Kalen on the raised platform. He didn't follow her. That told her everything. At the edge of the hall, someone stepped directly into her path. Tall, perfectly dressed, smiling too confidently. Maris Vale, Kalen's political ally. The woman the council had been pushing toward him for months. "You're leaving already?" Maris asked smoothly. Lyra stopped, slowly looked at her. "You seem disappointed." Maris crossed her arms. "I expected more emotion from a rejected mate. And I expected more dignity from the woman standing closest to my former fiancé before the ceremony ended." Several nearby nobles immediately went silent. Maris's smile tightened. "You should be careful what you imply." Lyra glanced toward Kalen across the hall. "I don't need to imply anything. He made his choice publicly." Maris stepped closer. "You lost your position the second he rejected you." Lyra's expression never changed. "Then why are you still trying to prove you won?" That landed hard. Maris's face cooled instantly. Before she could answer, heavy footsteps descended from the platform behind them. Kalen. "Enough," he said sharply. Maris stepped back immediately. Lyra looked at him calmly. "You finally decided to move." Kalen lowered his voice. "Don't make this uglier than it already is." A short laugh escaped her. "You rejected your fated mate in front of the entire pack. It was necessary." "For who?" Kalen hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. Lyra nodded once slowly. "Thought so." He stepped closer. "You'll adjust." That almost made her angry, almost. Instead, she looked at him like someone she no longer recognized. "No," she said quietly. "I already have." Then she walked past him, and this time, Kaylin turned to watch her leave. Lyra had almost reached the ceremonial hall doors when they slammed open hard enough to shake the walls. Cold wind rushed inside instantly. Then footsteps followed. Slow, heavy, controlled. Every head in the hall turned at once. Alpha King Rhaegor Vale entered without escort, black ceremonial coat dragging slightly behind him as soldiers moved aside instinctively to clear his path. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Even the council elders straightened nervously. Because Rhaegor Vale wasn't simply another alpha. He ruled territories larger than most packs combined, and he almost never appeared without warning. Kaylin's expression hardened the second he saw him. This is private territory. Rhaegor ignored him completely. His gaze landed directly on Lyra instead. "You're the rejected mate," he said calmly. The bluntness stunned the room into silence again. Lyra met his eyes evenly. Apparently. Rhaegor studied her for a long second, not pitying, assessing. Interesting. That unsettled her more than sympathy would have. Kaylin stepped down from the platform sharply. "State your purpose here." Still, Rhaegor didn't look at him. "I arrived for trade negotiations," he said. "Instead, I walked into a public rejection ceremony." A council elder spoke carefully. "Alpha King Rhaegor, this situation is already under control." Rhaegor glanced briefly around the hall. "Doesn't look controlled." Nobody answered that, because everyone knew he was right. The ceremonial bonfire was still unstable. Council members were openly arguing. Nobles whispered across the balconies above, and Lyra, the rejected fated mate, was standing alone near the exit while her former alpha defended politics instead of her. Rhaegor finally looked toward Kaylin. "You rejected her publicly?" Kaylin's jaw tightened. "That's none of your concern." Rhaegor's expression remained unreadable. Everything discarded publicly becomes everyone's concern. Murmurs spread instantly through the hall. Kaylin stepped closer. "Careful!" Rhaegor's gaze sharpened slightly. "Or what?" The tension between them hit immediately. Two alpha kings. One room. One rejected mate standing between them. Lyra exhaled quietly. "This isn't necessary." Rhaegor looked at her again. "Actually," he said calmly, "I think it is." Kaylin's voice dropped dangerously. "Leave my territory." Rhaegor finally smiled slightly. "Make me." The ceremonial hall felt smaller now. Not physically, politically. Every noble in the room understood the danger standing in front of them. Kaylin Vyre, Rhaegor Vale. Neither alpha moved first. That made everything worse. Lyra stood near the hall doors between them, already exhausted by becoming the center of a battle she never asked for. Kaylin stepped forward slowly. "You're overstepping." Rhaegor's expression remained calm. "You rejected your fated mate before witnesses. That gives you no authority here." "No," Rhaegor agreed. "You gave me that yourself." A dangerous silence followed. Several council members shifted nervously. One elder finally spoke. "This discussion should happen privately." Rhaegor looked unimpressed. The rejection wasn't private. Kaylin's jaw tightened visibly. Lyra noticed that bothered him more than the challenge itself. "Good." Kaylin turned toward her suddenly. "Come back to the platform." She stared at him. "Why?" "So we resolved this properly." "You already resolved it." His voice sharpened. "Lyra." The command almost sounded familiar. Almost. But whatever instinct once made her obey him had already cracked alongside the bond. She crossed her arms lightly. "You rejected me in front of the pack. What exactly is left to resolve?" Kaylin took another step closer. "You still belong to this territory." Rhaegor answered before she could. "She's not territory." Kaylin's eyes snapped toward him immediately. Stay out of this. Rhaegor tilted his head slightly. You made it public the second you broke the bond. And that gives you the right to interfere? No, Rhaegor replied evenly. It gives her the right to leave. The room went completely silent again, because that was true. Pack law protected rejected mates after public dissolution ceremonies. Kaelin knew it too, which meant, for the first time since the ceremony began, Lyra truly had a choice. Kaelin looked back at her carefully. You're emotional right now. That almost made her laugh. You think this is emotional? She asked quietly. You're reacting impulsively. No, she corrected. I'm reacting clearly. Rhaegor watched her closely after that, interested again. Kaelin noticed. His expression darkened instantly. Don't look at her like that, he warned. Rhaegor's gaze never left Lyra. You broke the bond yourself, he said calmly, and somehow, that line landed harder than the rejection had. The tension inside the ceremonial hall snapped tighter with every passing second. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the council elders stopped pretending they controlled the situation. Because the moment Rhaegor Vale entered the hall, power shifted. Kaelin noticed it too. That made him angrier. She's still under my protection, he said sharply. Lyra looked at him immediately. Protection? Kaelin ignored her and focused on Rhaegor instead. This doesn't concern you. Rhaegor finally started walking, not toward Kaelin, toward Lyra. Slow, intentional. Every step echoed across the silent ceremonial floor. Kaelin's voice hardened instantly. Stop. Rhaegor didn't. Lyra stayed still as he reached her side, close enough now that the entire hall understood exactly what this looked like. A challenge. Kaelin stepped forward immediately. Don't touch her. Rhaegor glanced at him briefly. Interesting choice of words for someone who just rejected her publicly. Several nobles visibly reacted to that. Kaelin heard it. His jaw tightened harder. Rhaegor looked down at Lyra afterward. You standing? Yes? Good. That simple exchange unsettled the room again, because Kaelin had spent the entire ceremony speaking about Lyra like a political inconvenience. Rhaegor spoke to her like she was actually present. Kaelin noticed the difference too late. This isn't a game, he snapped. Rhaegor's expression stayed calm. No, it's consequence. Then, in front of the entire hall, Rhaegor stepped fully beside Lyra, close enough for every witness to understand the meaning behind it. Lyra looked at him carefully. What exactly are you doing? Rhaegor answered without hesitation. Fixing what he declared broken. Shock exploded across the room instantly. Kaelin moved forward fast. Don't. Rhaegor finally raised one hand slightly near Lyra's shoulder, not touching her, claiming space beside her, claiming presence, claiming intention. Then he spoke clearly enough for the entire pack to hear. I claim her. The hall erupted. Council elders shouted immediately. Nobles rose from their seats. Several guards reached for weapons instinctively. Kaelin froze completely. You can't do that, he said. Rhaegor looked at him coldly. You rejected her in front of witnesses. That doesn't transfer ownership. Rhaegor's voice lowered dangerously. No, he agreed. It transfers freedom. And suddenly, everyone realized Lyra wasn't trapped anymore. She was choosing. The ceremonial hall had completely lost order. Council elders argued across the raised platform. Guards shifted nervously near the exits. Nobles whispered openly now instead of pretending discretion mattered anymore. None of it touched Lyra, because all attention stayed fixed on her, on the choice standing directly in front of her. Kaelin stepped forward first. Lyra, think carefully. She looked at him calmly. You should have done that earlier. This isn't funny. I know. Kaelin lowered his voice sharply. He's using this moment against me. Rhaegor answered before Lyra could. Of course I am. The honesty stunned half the room. Kaelin snapped toward him. You admit it? I don't hide strategy behind ceremony fires. That hit hard enough to silence him briefly. Lyra noticed. Rhaegor looked at her again afterward. But I'm not forcing you. Kaelin scoffed. Convenient wording. Rhaegor ignored him completely. You leave with me only if you choose it. The simplicity of that almost hurt, because Kaelin had spent the entire night deciding things for her, rejecting her, explaining her future, telling her she would adjust. Meanwhile, Rhaegor, the rival alpha standing beside her, was the only person asking what she actually wanted. Kaelin noticed her hesitation instantly. Lyra. She looked at him one last time. He stepped closer carefully now. You're emotional right now. Don't make permanent decisions because you're angry. That finally broke something, not painfully, clearly. Lyra exhaled once. You still think this is about emotion? What else would it be? Respect. Silence dropped immediately. Kaelin stared at her. For the first time all night, he looked uncertain instead of confident. Lyra continued quietly. You rejected me publicly like I was disposable. That's not what happened. You replaced me before the bonfire even cooled. Kaelin opened his mouth again. Lyra cut him off instantly. You already made your decision. Then she stepped backward, away from him, toward Rhaegor. The entire hall reacted at once. Gasps, shouts, shock. Kaelin's voice cracked for the first time. Lyra, wait! She stopped briefly near Rhaegor's side. Didn't turn around. No, she said softly. Then she made her choice publicly, and kept walking toward the Alpha King, who asked instead of assumed. Kaelin moved fast the second Lyra stepped toward Rhaegor. Too fast. His hand closed around her wrist before anyone else reacted. Don't do this, he said sharply. The entire hall froze again. Lyra looked down at his grip first, then slowly back up at him. You already did, Kaelin's jaw tightened. You're making decisions out of humiliation. Rhaegor stepped forward immediately. Release her. Kaelin ignored him completely. Lyra, listen to me. No, she replied calmly. You listen. That stopped him. The bond mark on her wrist flickered faintly beneath his grip, broken, unstable, fading more with every second. Lyra pulled her hand free slowly, not struggling, choosing. You rejected me in front of the pack, she said quietly. Now you don't get to decide how I leave. Kaelin looked shaken for the first time since the ceremony began. Not angry, not political, personal. Rhaegor noticed too. She chose already, he said evenly. Kaelin snapped toward him. You manipulated this. Rhaegor almost smiled. No, you created it. Several nobles reacted loudly to that, because everyone in the room understood the truth now. If Kaelin had stayed silent, if he had ended the bond privately, none of this would be happening. But he wanted public rejection. Now he was getting public consequence. Kaelin looked back at Lyra again. You think he actually cares about you? Rhaegor answered first. Careful. Kaelin ignored the warning. He's using you to embarrass me politically. Rhaegor's gaze sharpened dangerously. And you used her as collateral. Silence hit hard. Lyra looked at Kaelin carefully after that. Waiting. He didn't deny it. That was the final mistake. Rhaegor stepped beside her again afterward. Not possessive. Present. There's a difference, he said calmly, still watching Kaelin. I don't keep what doesn't choose me. Kaelin's expression darkened immediately, because that line exposed everything wrong with the way he handled her. Lyra noticed it too. Then she spoke quietly. That's the first honest thing anyone said to me tonight. Kaelin stared at her. You'd really leave with him? Lyra met his gaze steadily. No, she corrected softly. I'm leaving because of you. And somehow, that hurt him more than watching her walk away ever would. Nobody stopped them when they reached the ceremonial hall doors. Not the guards, not the council, Not even Kalen. That part shocked the pack most, because Alpha Kalen Vire had spent years controlling every room he entered. Now he stood motionless, while his greatest rival walked away beside the woman he publicly rejected. The massive hall doors opened slowly. Cold night air rushed inside instantly. Lyra stepped through first. Rhaegor followed beside her without speaking. Behind them, whispers exploded across the ceremonial hall. He actually lost her. In front of everyone. Rhaegor claimed her publicly. The council will never recover from this. Kalen heard every word. That made the silence around him worse. Outside, the palace courtyard stretched beneath silver torchlight, while guards stationed along the gates lowered their eyes as Lyra crossed the stone pathway. No one challenged her. Not anymore. Halfway across the courtyard, Kalen's voice finally followed behind them. Lyra. She stopped walking. Rhaegor stopped too, but remained silent beside her. Slowly, Lyra turned her head slightly toward the hall entrance where Kalen stood alone beneath the ceremonial lights. You're really leaving, he said. She looked at him calmly. You already told me to. That's not what I meant. No, she agreed quietly. It's exactly what you meant. Kalen stepped forward into the courtyard. This doesn't have to become political, Rhaegor answered immediately. You made it political the second you rejected your fated mate publicly. Kalen ignored him and focused only on Lyra. Come back inside. For what? We can resolve this privately. Lyra almost laughed. Now you want privacy? His expression tightened. Too late. Rhaegor glanced toward him calmly. You made rejection public, he said, so I made consequence public. That landed hard enough to silence the entire courtyard. Kalen looked at Lyra one last time. If you leave now, everything changes. She faced him fully for the first time since exiting the hall. Yes, she said softly. That's the point. Then she turned away again. And together, she and Rhaegor walked toward the outer gates while the Alpha who rejected her stood behind them, realizing too late. Some mistakes could not be recalled once witnessed publicly. The outer territory gates closed behind them with a heavy metallic sound. Final. Lyra didn't look back. The cold wind outside the territory walls hit harder without the heat of the ceremonial fires behind them, but she kept walking steadily beside Rhaegor across the dark stone road leading north. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Behind them, Kalen's territory faded slowly into the distance. Ahead, only open land remained. Rhaegor finally broke the silence first. You're calmer than expected. Lyra looked forward. Should I be screaming? Most rejected mates would. I stopped being shocked when he chose politics over me months ago. That answer interested him immediately. You knew? I suspected. Rhaegor nodded once slowly. Still stayed. I thought loyalty mattered. And now, Lyra exhaled quietly. Now I think loyalty without respect is just slow humiliation. Silence settled again after that. Not uncomfortable, measured. Rhaegor glanced sideways at her briefly. You understand what happens politically after tonight. Kalen loses standing. He loses more than that. Lyra looked at him. And what do you gain? Rhaegor answered honestly. An enemy who created his own weakness publicly. That bluntness almost made her smile. Almost. Behind them, distant horns suddenly echoed faintly from Kalen's territory walls. Pack alert signals. Too late. Rhaegor heard them too, but didn't slow his pace. Lyra noticed. You expected that reaction. I expected worse. A few more quiet steps passed before she finally asked the question waiting between them since the hall. You didn't have to interfere. Yes, Rhaegor replied calmly. I did. Why? He looked ahead toward the dark road. Because men like Kalen believe rejection destroys value. Lyra stayed silent. Rhaegor continued quietly. I dislike waste. That almost sounded cold, except his next words weren't. He threw away someone loyal in front of his entire pack just to prove control. Lyra looked at him carefully after that. And now? Rhaegor finally looked directly at her. Now, he said evenly, you're no longer his mistake. A pause, then, you're my decision. The words settled heavily between them as they continued walking deeper into rival territory together, while far behind them, the alpha who rejected his fated mate finally understood something irreversible. Broken bonds don't always leave people empty. Sometimes, they leave them free enough to be chosen by someone stronger.